You want me to be honest? The favoritism Tony still shows for our fucking cousin.
You shouldn't feel sorry for Christopher Moltisanti. And if you do, you probably fell for the same manipulation Tony did. There is something perversely fascinating about the enduring sympathy for Christopher Moltisanti. Of all the detestable sociopaths who populate The Sopranos, none seems to inspire quite the same level of misguided pity. Viewers weep for his wasted potential. They mourn his death. And some even sport t-shirts emblazoned with his face, as though he were a doomed prince rather than a volatile, self-absorbed junkie who bludgeoned, strangled, and snorted his way through 6 seasons of misery.
What about Moltisanti?
The defense of Christopher often rests on the flimsiest of arguments, that he was a product of his environment, younger than the others, or just trying to do better. But age and environment only explain so much. Christopher didn't stumble into the moral abyss. He dove headfirst, brick in hand, literally, in one infamous moment when he hurled one at a waiter for daring to request a better tip. His capacity for cruelty was not circumstantial. It was recreational.
Christopher did this?
Let's dispense with sentimentality. Christopher was a domestic abuser who brutalized Adriana, his fiancée, with a regularity that made the other mobsters, men hardly known for chivalry, seem almost restrained. Even Tony Soprano, patron saint of hypocritical violence, never pulverized a partner quite the way Christopher did.
You want some eggs?
I need to clear my head.
Adriana, who should have been his redemption arc, instead became another entry in his rap sheet. Beaten, betrayed, and ultimately sacrificed because it was convenient for him. That he hesitated for 5 seconds before selling her out to Tony's death squad is somehow cited as evidence of a soul. His other moral triumphs include killing a bakery clerk for being rude, murdering his friend JT Dolan over a petty argument, and smothering his dog in a heroin stupor, an act he found mildly amusing.
Last week when I came home to learn that you had killed our dog.
These aren't the deeds of a conflicted anti-hero. They're the resume of a narcissist with a talent for self-pity. And yet, despite this catalog of depravity, audiences continue to cradle him in their collective arms. Why? Because Michael Imperioli made him charismatic. Imperioli imbued Christopher with humor, restlessness, and just enough wounded humanity to trick us into thinking there was something beneath the slime. He could quote Rebel Without a Cause and look good doing it.
Human frailty makes me sick sometimes.
He could deliver a line like, "Human frailty really makes me sick sometimes," and make it sound profound rather than pathetic. Imperioli's performance didn't redeem Christopher. It disguised him. Part of the illusion lies in contrast. When compared with Tony's clinical sadism or Paulie's senile cruelty, Christopher's chaos almost reads as youthful angst. He is perpetually the kid brother of the crew, the one who complains, dreams, fails, and tries again. The audience, conditioned by decades of anti-hero storytelling, mistakes failure for depth. Christopher's flailing isn't evidence of a tortured soul, it's evidence of incompetence.
Christopher Moltisanti is a fucking loose cannon.
He was bad at being a gangster, worse at being a partner, and terminally delusional about being an artist. Still, his self-awareness earns him defenders. He knew he was damned, they argue.
I'm going to hell, T.
He said so often enough, "I'm going to hell." But self-awareness is not the same as growth. A man who recognizes his rot and chooses to marinate in it is not enlightened. He's lazy.
It's like just the fucking regularness of life is too fucking hard for me or something.
Christopher's frequent laments about the regularness of life and his yearning for artistic escape are not philosophical musings, but tantrums of entitlement. He wanted the rewards of virtue without the work. He wasn't a tragic poet. He was a petulant intern who thought his screenplay could buy him salvation. The irony is that Christopher does, in flashes, understand the corruption around him better than anyone else. He sees through Tony's mythologizing of his father, through the hypocrisy of mob honor, through the performative loyalty that defines their world.
You want me to be honest?
He calls Tony out on it, then immediately begs for his approval. He identifies the sickness of the system but never opts out. He confuses clarity with courage, insight with integrity. The result is a man fully aware of his damnation and utterly incapable of stopping it. This paradox is what keeps Christopher compelling, if not sympathetic.
I killed that fucking email cola on nothing.
He is a self-aware sociopath, a man who feels guilt not as moral pain, but as narrative inconvenience. He kills, he grieves, he snorts, and then he recycles the same monologue about destiny.
But there's nothing you want to talk about?
Every time he vows to change, he's really auditioning for forgiveness. And Tony, the world's most manipulative father figure, indulges him just enough to keep him tethered.
I love that kid like I love my son.
Tony and Christopher's relationship is a grotesque mirror of the Soprano family dynamic. Love as ownership, mentorship as manipulation. Tony shapes Christopher the way Johnny Boy shaped Tony, through neglect, cruelty, and conditional affection. It's an intergenerational assembly line of men mistaking exploitation for loyalty.
I'll never pass the drug test.
Some claim Christopher's death was unjust, that Tony's suffocating of him was the final betrayal. But in truth, it was mercy killing by the logic of that universe. Tony simply finished what Christopher had been doing to himself for years.
You know what happened to Christopher Moltisanti?
By that point, Christopher had alienated his crew, destroyed his fiancée, botched every business venture, and relapsed for the 1,000th time. He wasn't on a tragic trajectory. He was circling the drain. Even so, it's easy to see why people feel for him. Addiction narratives have a gravitational pull. Christopher's spiraling reads like the story of a man at war with his demons. And for many viewers who know that struggle, the pain is recognizable. But the show refuses to romanticize it.
So you have to be here, you fucking AA sponsor?
Christopher isn't a noble addict crushed by circumstance. He's a man who weaponizes his addiction to evade responsibility. His suffering elicits pity, but not compassion. At least not from those paying attention.
John, this is Christopher.
There's also the aesthetic factor. Christopher represents youth, energy, and the illusion of change in a world of static middle-aged mobsters. His ambition, however misguided, injects a volatility that keeps the series alive. He is the bridge between old and new, the embodiment of every generational delusion that one can inherit rot and somehow turn it into art. The audience roots for him because he seems like someone who might escape. Then he doesn't, because The Sopranos is honest enough to admit that most people don't. By the final season, whatever sympathy he once commanded has curdled. He is no longer the scrappy underdog trying to rise above the muck, but the muck itself. Resentful, violent, self-absorbed, and terminally small. When Tony looks at him gasping in that car and makes the decision, it's not rage but relief. The viewer may flinch, but the show doesn't. Christopher's death isn't tragic, it's inevitable. And yet, the fascination endures. Because Christopher Moltisanti embodies the ultimate modern pathology, the belief that awareness excuses behavior. He knows he's a monster, therefore he's forgiven. He recognizes the system is corrupt, therefore he's exempt. He talks about his trauma, so he must be deep. It's the logic of every self-proclaimed victim who confuses confession with redemption. If The Sopranos is a story about moral rot, Christopher is its most honest symptom. Tony intellectualizes his brutality. Paulie hides behind superstition. Silvio cloaks his violence in professionalism.
Everything's so fucking morbid.
There's a man lying dead over there.
Christopher just bleeds it out, whining, high, and convinced he's the tragic center of the universe. He isn't. He's the cautionary tale masquerading as a protagonist, the man who mistook introspection for progress, and self-loathing for a conscience. So no, Christopher Moltisanti doesn't deserve sympathy. He deserves recognition as a brilliantly written portrait of wasted potential, human weakness, and the seductive myth of self-awareness. Imperioli's genius was to make the audience care about a man who, by every moral measure, should repel them. That we still debate his worth is proof of how expertly the show manipulates empathy.
Low-life cunt.
But let's be clear. The man who beat Adriana, killed for sport, and choked on his own self-pity did not fall from grace. He tripped over his own ego and mistook the landing for tragedy.
You can start writing again.
I could do my memoirs finally.
And in that, perhaps, he finally achieved his dream of being a great American writer. He just wrote his story in blood instead of ink. Christopher wanted to be remembered. Don't make him write. Subscribe.